This is Decades for November 1st. Today in 1985, actor and comedian Phil Silvers passed away. His trademark eyeglasses are perhaps his most recognizable feature. He even wore them when they were no longer necessary for him to see. When asked about the frames, Silvers replied, "I learned people like a sign of weakness in a performer. It makes him seem more human and gives them more of a fellow feeling toward him." Now the Dick Cavett Show, featuring Phil Silvers. This is Decades.
Among comedians, he's known as perfection. That on the Bilko series, which played for so many seasons, but not enough, he made a necklace of awards. He's probably got as many Emmys as the Academy has yet to give out, that he has won for this and that. And he's been awarded and acclaimed, and he's starred in burlesque and Broadway and films and television. And in all of those things, he has acquitted himself with that inimitable, what seems to be uninfluenced, easy style of comedy that is just a God-given gift. So would you welcome the great Phil Silvers. That all right?
Well, Dick, after that introduction, everything is downhill. If I'm smart, I'd walk away from here now. But I've been dying to tell you something that happened the last time we met. I was doing the revival of Forum in New York.
Funny thing happened on the way to that?
Yes, and you were on a major network, and you had Jack Benny and myself as your guests, and a young lady, a British actress, who never did get on, incidentally. Well, anyway, the folks know that you do it in the afternoon and then show it at night. And Jack came one night before you had him on the show, and he saw Forum. I don't know what he expected to see, but he went insane. He thought that was the greatest performance he ever saw. And of course he was right. And as you know, I won. Very few people win Tonys in revivals, and I did.
That's right.
How are you? Well, anyway, you had us both on. Now, this is the part you don't know about. You had us both on the show, your television show, and you had Jack on first, who spent all his time telling how great I was. I stood in the wings and listened to this, you know? And then I came on, there was very little for me to do, and we had a jovial time, and you were very sweet to the young English actress and told her you'd have her back tomorrow night, but how often do I get these two nuts together? And fine, and we left, and you talked to, now this is the part you don't know. When we get into the entrance where we both had cars waiting, me to take me to the theater and Jack to go to see his show, I said, "Jack, there's nobody like you in the world. You spend half your visit with Dick talking how great I was, eulogizing me." He says, "Well, I meant it." I said, "Yes, Jack, but it's so painful. I'm so guilty." He says, "Guilty about what?" I said, "Jack, I never liked you." Well, the last I saw of him, he was on the floor and I was in the limousine heading away.
Oh, when he broke up, there was no doubt about it.
You know, there's a misnomer about him being the #1 audience. He laughs when it's funny. He isn't a sucker, the sucker audience you think he is.
He didn't laugh to be polite.
No, he laughed. There's a classic happening with him. Jeanette MacDonald had just married Gene Raymond, and it was their first dinner party, and Jack was invited amongst all the celebrities in Hollywood, and George Burns, that evil little man who controlled Jack, he called up Jack and said, "Are you going to the MacDonald party, Jeanette MacDonald and Gene Raymond?" And Jack said, "Yes, 3 weeks from today." He said, "Jack, don't go." And Jack said, well, why not? He said, well, you disgrace yourself. And Jack knows he was a sitting duck for George, but this he didn't understand. He said, what do you mean disgrace myself? Well, you know what'll happen. After dinner, Jeanette will come out and she'll sing, and you'll break up laughing. And Jack says, George, I love you. I always have. And everybody knows I'm a sucker for you, but don't treat me like a congenital idiot. And he hung up the phone. He was furious at him. 2 days later, Georgie Jessel called and said, Jack, you're not going to go to the McDonald's. It was all set up. And he hung up on him. Lou Holtz called, and he was furious.
Yeah.
And he went to the party and didn't talk to anybody. He had dinner, went into the living room, and he was furious what do they think? I mean, all right, so I laugh, but I'm not a stupid idiot. He lit a cigar. Jeanette MacDonald, the hostess, walked in the room towards the piano, and they carried Jack out of the room. He collapsed. The power of suggestion.
And Burns knew it would work, of course.
Now we go into my life, because we're going to do about 4 shows.
Oh.
Because you're the one interviewer I respect and admire and truly love very much. And if you think, I haven't got time left to lie, Dick.
Really?
And you're the best of your kind.
Oh, that's embarrassing, because I've never liked you.
I knew that would come back and
Boy,
haunt
did you
me.
set me up for that.
Oh, beautiful.
There's an image that most comics had wretched childhoods, and that somehow they escaped into laughter, you know.
Well, you
and
see, I used to be
had
Jewish.
laughter.
I gave it up. It's too tough.
Used to be Jewish.
I'm kidding.
Oh, right.
I'm the youngest of what was 8 children, which is quite a penalty.
Yeah.
Because you see your brothers and sisters pass away. Because I just celebrated my 70th birthday. And where I get it from, I don't know, but that's all I ever wanted to do from the age of 1. And if you think kids don't remember, they do. I wanted to be on the stage, and I had a valid reason. It'll be hard for you to believe this, but I had a brilliant voice, a lovely singing voice. And my family tolerated me. They didn't understand it. They'd never been backstage in the theater in the entire lineage of my family. I have a cousin was an usher once.
Oh,
That's
wow.
the closest to it. And my dad was the color in my life, in my entire family. They were lawyers and accountants, but my father escaped from Russia. The story, as it's told through the generations, was he was 18 and my mom was 17. She was quite pretty. And the Cossacks came through, and one guy got off a horse and made for my mother. My father conked him with a shovel, and they don't know if he killed him or not. But that night, this is Fiddler on the Roof, isn't it?
Gee.
And the villagers put him in a hayloft, and they escaped into Germany and eventually into America, into the East Side, which was a melting pot of Irish, Italian, Jewish immigrants. And in the evaluation at Ellis Island, when they questioned what was your occupation, my father was a sheet metal worker, but it came out steel worker. So he was the only Jew, perhaps, that were on the skyscrapers of what was going to be New York. That was a purely 99% Irish immigrant endeavor. So my dad's conception of the American way of life was learned from Irishmen, whereas he retained being a religious Jew. So he'd speak with a Jewish accent and an Irish rock. Well, I'll tell you, be jabbers. Do you know many Jews that chew tobacco? It drove my mother crazy, you know. He also visited Eugene V. Debs. He learned the American way quick. He learned to read and write. Yeah. My mom was too busy having her children.
They were both uneducated as far as...
Not my father. He became educated. My mother was uneducated. She just knew and loved her family.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand my dream. I had to be on stage. And I sing in these hoodlum clubs. Also, there was some, what you would call beer gardens around in Brooklyn. And I got lost one day in the time limit. I would think I was 9, and I sang. One of my big numbers was, break the news to mother. And you'd see hoodlums crying and everything. Anyway, they threw money. The waiters helped me pick up money. So I lost half of it. Well, it was about $12 and change. And then I came home, and it was well past 11:30, and I was petrified to walk up the stairs of my tenement because there was no lights in the hall. But I finally, because in every corner I saw an ogre, you know. I finally came, my dad was waiting. He says, you better have a very good excuse. I said, Papa, I didn't know it was that late. And then I started taking out the change. It was about $12, which was more than he made a day. He says, but we'll have no more of it, you know? And then he didn't like his children growing up in Bronzeville, which I told you was, this isn't my line, but it's a famous line. In Bronzeville, you either became a judge or you got the chair. There was no in between, you know?
Yeah.
So we moved to the outskirts, Bensonhurst. My father had enough money to buy a little one-family house. He was always ill. He never lived to see my so-called success. This I regret.
That is too bad.
Yes.
Yeah, really
I
is.
maybe, if you want to be religious, since I get daily correspondence from Cardinal, weekly correspondence from Cardinal Cook, and you must think I'm making that up, but I'm not. Because when I was stricken in Forum, you knew I had a stroke.
Yes,
And
I'd heard that you had a
it
slight...
was right after your show, incidentally. I don't think you had anything to do with it. But you do kill a lot of laughs. Anyway, they took me to a Catholic hospital, St. Clair. And there was a young man, I'm going back a little, when I was playing the Roxy, he came in a sailor's uniform. He met me in Toots Shores. Well, I took him to dinner and treated him like you would treat any nice, like you in Omaha, you know?
Yeah.
And his name is Billy McCormick. And I knew before his parents knew that he was headed for the priesthood. And if there ever was a dedicated Catholic, it was him. He is now Monsignor William McCormick, assigned to the Cardinal's office. His wealth, you've heard of the Moore McCormick lines. His wealth is well into the $400 million, which means nothing to him. He has got the
That's what he
real
wanted.
call. Well, when I had the stroke, Father McCormick was making his rounds in the hospital and came upon me, and he didn't want to show shock. He says, you'll do anything for a laugh, won't you? And he was trying to be... And I told him what happened, and he was very embarrassed because he truly loved me and still does. We correspond. And finally he said, let me lay a little prayer on you. Well, I think I'm religious. I think there's a God, but I don't practice it, you know? I just think being decent is the keynote. Anyway, if he's wants to talk to Jesus, it's all right with me, you know? So I bowed my head while he tried to get the Jewish saints in. Father Abraham, look down upon thy son David. And he was struggling with it. I said, you can say Christ. He was one of us. Say Christ. And he broke up. Anyway, the
Got a
next
laugh
day,
from the bed.
I've jumped a day ahead. The next day, the nuns are fixing my hair and fixing my pillow. And standing in the doorway is the most handsome, deeply religious, beautiful man, Cardinal Cook, the titular head of the whole Catholic diocese of the East Coast. And I just looked at him, and I know you know this about comedians. You can't help it. Even when you're dying, you got to say a funny thing. I just looked up at him, and I said, if this is a sneaky way to convert me, it ain't going to work. And he broke up. Well, he writes to me, he says, you sure you're not smoking? And
So he's looking after you.
well, he cares, and that's
nice.
A tremendous kind of a wall against the bigotry you hear about, you know.
Well, when you were a kid, and you knew you wanted to be on stage, where did you first see that there were stages to be on? You know what I mean?
In those clubs.
The first time you walked into one of those clubs and saw a
Yeah.
singer, you said, that's for
No,
me?
no, I'm sorry, a gymnasium where fighters trained. They let me in free. And while they were getting rubbed, I'd say, M is for the million things. And, you know, murderers crying, you know.
Nobody said, get him out of here.
But there was one man now, Dick, when you're my age, you'll meet a boy your age, and you'll say, Bob Hope, and he won't know what you're talking about. That's what the years do. So I'm going to mention a name that you never heard.
But Bob Hope's never going to go.
No.
He's only 34 as it is now.
Unless they pay him what he asks. I don't know, Bob has got he owns the whole valley. You know, when you walk in the valley, he could say, get out. Anyway, there was a man named Gus Edwards.
Yes.
He was a songwriter. He wrote School Days,
Gus Edwards,
dear
School
old
Days,
home. Incidentally, I want to be, since I know the timing of your show, my daughter's getting married a week from Sunday.
Oh.
And so you knew I wrote Nancy with the laughing face, didn't you?
Well, I've been told.
Well, I did. I wrote it as a joke at Nancy's 5th birthday party, Frank Sinatra's Nancy. And my Nancy, my second child, who I named Nancy, till she was about 6, thought it was her song. I had to tell her. But she's getting married the 8th of November, and I know that I'm not giving it away. I'll do it for you if you want me to, but I've written a whole new lyric to fit her, which I will do at the wedding.
What did you change in the lyric?
I made it specially her.
Oh, I see. There's
Well,
no doubt
let's
about
get
it.
back to Gus Edwards.
Okay.
Just like great football players gravitate to Notre Dame, not lately, but they used to, so did children entertainment go to Gus Edwards. Because he discovered Georgie Jessel, Eddie Cantor, Walter Winchell. They're the generation ahead of me.
You see those old photos, and there they all are in their juvenile...
Well, I knew all about
costumes.
show business.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to Gus Edwards to make him hear me sing. Well, my dad, as I told you, didn't like his children growing up in Brownsville, that rough neighborhood. So we moved to, I told you, Benzonite, the outskirts, where I met a new tiny kid that wore a clean shirt, that showed up in school, didn't hit the teacher. You know, it was a whole new, nobody robbed the store in this new neighborhood. Well, all of which I did, because you had to.
Oh, you had to
You had to,
survive.
Brownsville, you had to go, but it never stood with me. Yeah. My love for the theater saved me, because that's where I was headed. Well, anyway, when we moved to Benzonite, it's near the Coney Island, and the kid at the beach had a ukulele, and I was singing. And there's a big theater in the island, was a big theater, named the Brighton Beach Theater, and Gus Edwards was playing there. And he was a great extrovert. Come and see me, son, and he threw down a card. That meant nothing. He couldn't have heard what I was singing, standing on the Broadway, but Gus Edwards, I dug that. It was summer, no school. And I showed up for a formal audition. This was publicity. Out of maybe 10,000 kids, he'd hired one. But Gus Edwards was synonymous with children entertainment.
Yeah.
Well, he heard me sing right. I belted one out. He says, you'll hear from me, son. And then my family incessantly teased me. Every time the phone rang, they said, there's Gus Edwards calling. One day he called and wanted to hear me in a theater sing right. So my dad went with me. And fortunately, I have a cousin, same age, same name. 16, but with the same name. My real name is Silver, without the S. People might think I've condensed it from Silverstein or Silverberg, but it isn't so. My name is Silver.
You've lengthened it.
No, they called me Silvers, because there were Silvers ahead of me. Sid Silvers, Lou Silvers, who used to conduct for Jolson. Well, Gus heard me sing right this time. And they had to get a birth certificate, so I used my cousin's. And he put me on in the middle of the week at the Palace. This I never heard of. I don't know if any actor can say that his first formal appearance was at the Palace, which was every actor's dream. Are we going over time?
That's scary. No, we have several minutes here.
Oh, good. Well, I'll only tell you this because I can't stand bores. They steal your time. They're thieves. I wouldn't be telling you this if it wasn't brilliant. He had a stock uniform, a newsboy's uniform for every new kid. And his introduction was always the same, if it was a new kid. I heard a newsboy singing at his wares, and I thought he was that good, he deserved his chance in front of you. And there was a set newsboy's outfit in the wardrobe.
It was always newsboy.
And it was me, young Master Philip Silver. And I came out as rehearsed. And he said, well, you're on the stage now, son. I suppose you're going to hi-hat them other kids now. I said, hi-hat them kids? I should say not, Uncle Gus. Listen. The reason I said listen is my older brother said, don't disgrace the family. Act like a little gentleman. No talking, singing, dancing. Pronounce your G's. So I was afraid to say listen. I said, Liston.
Liston was more elegant.
And if I was a millionaire, here's the point I'm coming to. The stupidity of bigotry. Because we were, in Brownsville, anti-Gentile. And the line was, if I was a millionaire, kids, if I was a millionaire, there wouldn't be nothing. Don't tell me I'm shooting out there. If I was a real live, original lyric, if I was a real live, honest to goodness, cross my heart millionaire, I'd buy up all the schoolrooms in the nation. I couldn't do that. We were told in Brownsville, if you crossed your heart and you were a Jew, your teeth fell out. I couldn't do it. That's what bigotry is all about. And Gus saw my fear. He saw I wasn't being naughty. I just was petrified to do that. So he changed the line. If I was a real live, honest to goodness, regular millionaire. In the Palace, Wednesday of the week, I did 8 choruses before they let me off. And I had a brilliant voice. I was in pre-kindergarten, and they were doing Priscilla Alden and John, what was that mother's name?
Yes, John.
Speak for yourself, John.
John and
Miles
Priscilla.
Standish.
Miles Standish.
And the little kindergarten kids, if you brought your own costume, it meant a buckle hat and an oilskin hat, which my father made a hat for me. All we did was walk across, the young pilgrims, and then the higher graders did Pilgrim's Progress, or whatever the play was. Well, I couldn't bear that. Just walking across the stage. I wanted to stay on. So I said to this other 5-year-old kid, when we get on, I'll say, look out, there go the Indians, and we'll fall. And this kid looked at me like I was insane. But I went on and said, oh my, the Indians, no. The teacher reached in, took my ear, and pulled me off the stage. That's where it's born.
Phil
Well,
Silvers was really born at that
I went
moment.
with Gus Edwards, and then tragedy hit. At the age of 14, if I hadn't kept singing, boys' voices change. Sometimes you come back at a lower timbre.
Yeah.
Mine left, and I was literally
Altogether?
through at the age of 15.
Well,
Fortunately, somebody needed a kid in an act to do a comedy role. From then I went into burlesque, where I was 20 years ahead of everybody.
well, we could... let's pick up the story at that point.
All right.
Phil Silvers, we've gotten you out of puberty, up to puberty now, haven't we? And we'll pick up with puberty next time. Thank you.
You're watching Decades for November 1st. Today we're honoring actor and comedian Phil Silvers. He passed away on this day in 1985. Silvers is perhaps best known for his sitcom, The Phil Silvers Show. The sitcom was mostly filmed live, which allowed Phil Silvers the open platform to improvise when needed. Silvers once said, "I'm an impatient comedian, and I feel the audience is as impatient as me." Now enjoy more of his 1982 appearance on The Dick Cavett Show.
Good evening. Here I sit with the beautiful skyline of Beverly Hills behind us, and the man to my right. This is I had done a show with him before, and we're taping this one because there's so much to talk about with him that it would take volumes. I hope he gets to writing them. Phil Silvers is one of America's great comedians, as I think almost everybody knows. And if he'd only done Sergeant Bilko, of course, he would be immortal. But before that, he had a career, as we learned last night, in some very small places in Brownsville. He has entertained the troops. He's gone on, of course, then to make pictures, star in High Button Shoes, Top Banana on Broadway, and be awarded, and if I can't really for him, I could go on, but it would obviously kill time. Here's a man with so many awards that it would be difficult for him to carry them here. They would clank. Will you welcome the great Phil Silvers again?
Thank you very much. You show extreme good taste.
When we left our story last time, the young Phil Silvers had graduated into his 14th year, I believe. Sounds like
through.
Mm-hmm. And finished as a singer.
Finished the show with no more voice. Some boys' voices change and come back of a lower timbre and stronger. Mine, no voice.
You were then considered Brownsville's answer to Sophie Tucker or something.
Yes,
somebody said.
Somebody wrote that out on the billing once. Well, there was a very big comedy act that needed a fresh kid in their act to heckle from the box. And they thought of me, because we had been on the bill when I was headlining over them with the Gus Edwards act. They said, well, get that kid. Not only that, he'll give us a great finish, because he'll sing at the end. They didn't know. I couldn't sing anymore. I answered, they found me, and I went to the interview, and they liked me. And a strange thing, Dick, I was always a chubby, short little kid. And when my voice left me, I attributed it to bad tonsils or something, and I had them removed. They were good tonsils. Or maybe they were bad because I grew in 1 year to my present height, which is almost 6 feet. Anyway, when these people heard I couldn't sing, they took me anyway. And that made me hang in to the last remaining act few years that was vaudeville. It was dying a slow death. But I played the Palace 8 times a year. I grew up with the traditions that you read about. To say to kids today, to play the Palace, they don't know what you're talking about, because nowadays the kids in show business is a half hour, he's out with Johnny Carson. But they're actors in this space. They have not learned to use their body. They tell a joke. A funny thing happened to me. Talk about funny things. I was on a plane. Everything happens on a plane in the monology. Well, anyway, I made the one right move of my life.
The one?
I think. I mean, the one professional right move. Minsky's, you knew it was there, but you didn't talk about it. He created the striptease thing, and comedians literally, if you made them laugh in burlesque, you were a man comedy-wise, because they came to see the girls. And so I went and I met a brilliant, lovely, wonderful, not brilliant, stupid, because he should be alive today. He was told the next drink might kill him, and it didn't stop him. His name was Rags Raglan, and I don't have a brother I love any more than I love Rags. Because in burlesque, it wasn't how funny you are. How often are you funny? Because nobody told you what to do. The scenes were all, see, Abbott and Costello did Who's On First. I could have done that. It belonged to me as much as them. They had the first crack at the good audiences with it. Because nobody knows where these scenes came from. They're Americana. And the strip was the thing. The girls were the thing. And so if you could make those hoodlums laugh, then you really were practicing to be a comedian. I'll never forget a young singer came in, Bob Alder, and he had a son with him, a year-old baby, and I held him in my arms, Alan Alder. And, he used to ad-lib. And Bob drove the girls crazy because he was so handsome, but he never deviated. He was a married man, and that was it. And he had the worst job in burlesque. Oh, pretty girl, looking that way. And for 25 cents, the jerks that came to the theater could see all the nudity on the stage, you know. He couldn't do that.
are you friends with Frank Sinatra? I don't know why I picture that. Were you
Oh,
one
yes.
of one of the gang? Of
But I
guys
was perhaps his closest friend
Yeah.
at one time, until that one song, that one saying.
That one what?
I'd met a young girl. I'm standing at Fox. I spent 11 years at 20th Century at Fox doing the same joke. Every picture, I followed John Payne and Victor Mature around, and I never knew. I had the same opening line in every picture. Somewhere in the middle of the first act, I'd come running in and say, I got the stuff in the car. To this day, I don't know what the stuff in the car was. You know? Same role, you know, they always considered was Betty Grable's hairdo right and everything. And Sinatra. Oh, yes. So I'm standing across the soundstage, and there's two girls, and one girl is heavenly beauty. And I said to a dance director I knew, who is that beautiful child? He says, that is Martha Montgomery. She later married the great conductor, he won the Academy Award every year. There's 100 brothers had the same name. Well, I'll get it. Anyway, this beautiful girl came towards me, and I said, how are you, Miss Montgomery? She says, my name is Dennison when you have the time. I said, oh, wait a minute. Hey, Charlie, come here. I asked you who was the most beautiful girl standing. What name did you tell me? He says, Martha Montgomery. Alfred Newman, she married.
Newman.
I said, when you said Montgomery, when he said Montgomery, there was only one beautiful girl, that was you. So I thought your name was Montgomery. She had won the Miss America contest, lying about her age. She was 17. And with it came a Fox contract, and she had I always get them with a widowed mother, you know? And so she didn't like being in pictures, but she can. And it took a little while. We fell very much in love. But my love wasn't the way it is now. I love her more than ever now. Then I was fighting to make a career, you know? So on our honeymoon, delayed honeymoon, taking her to New York for the first, I thought it was great. I took her to Toots Shores. I said, Mrs. Yogi Berra, one of the greats, meet Joe DiMaggio. And she was getting sicker and sicker. She wanted to walk in Central Park with me. I couldn't imagine that a girl wanted to be romantic with me, you know? I thought she'd like my talent. I always had that feeling. I always felt I was rather ugly for some reason. I was not. I had a nice looking fella. Anyway, while on our honeymoon, Sinatra's manager, Sinatra was at the height of his first career, and he was very much disliked overseas, erroneously so. 4F, making $1 million an hour, you know. And I'd been over 3 times. Comedians could do no wrong. I used to insult them, you know, and they loved it. And they asked me to go with them, because I could take the onus of, you know, that envy away. And I made this girl, we never recovered our marriage, even though we married for almost 6 years. She had to go back to the coast alone, and I went. On my first airplane ride, I was petrified. Flew the ocean, had to follow the Fifth Army all through North Africa, up and down Italy with Sinatra, and in every place we went, he conquered them. But I was told by Army nurses that many places, you know, battle-weary kids, they've lost their sense of behavior. They had things ready to throw. They resented a 4F kid singing, making $1 million an hour. But they never had a chance. I came out first, and we always were impeccably dressed. Sinatra saw to that. He's the neatest man the world has ever known. He really is. From years of traveling with the band, he knows how to, that steam thing you do in the bathroom.
In the shower.
I used to throw my shoes under the netting, you know, for the mosquito scare. Have these ready in the morning, and he'd shine his shoes. And there was no place to dissipate. And so he was always in voice. But I never said, here he is, that great young American singer, Frank Sinatra. Never did that. I came out alone. I said, it's a lovely camp. I've watched everything. My one word to you fellas is dessert, which would get a big laugh. I said, the food is very good. You'll recognize this. I can't say the real word. The food's very good. Something on a shingle, that was another half a minute left. At which point Sinatra was on, and I'd look at him. The first Sinatra, the skinny Sinatra. Try to visualize that. I just look at him and say, the blood bank is 2 blocks that way. I know there's a food shortage, but this is ridiculous. But it's just I thought I'd sing one or two songs. I gave him the singing lesson, watch your notes, and typically American, they switched. And when he sang, man, I guess I'm a little, he could sing for me. Even today, nobody like him. We had a day off, 2 days off in Rome. And they built us in a little hotel, and Frank says, this is a lot of malarkey. And generals and all those back of the war soldiers living at the big hotel, I can't think of the name, Excelsior. And I said, Frank, we're under the care of the army. He said, that's the trouble, you're listening to rules. So we went with our bags and got a suite at the Excelsior. Then he said, let's have an audience with the Pope. I said, give me a drag of that, whatever you've spoken. What do you mean have an audience with the Pope? People wait all their lives for this. Yeah. He said, that's you, listening to rules and regulations. He called the American ambassador's office, requested it. They said, be where we can reach you. They called back in a half hour and said, be at the side door at the Vatican at a certain time. This is the truth, gospel truth. And I said, Frank, we can't exclude the young ladies. We had 2 lovely girls. Because we were entertaining wounded men. We'd go into ambulance ships, you know, and they held up better than we did. Faye McKenzie and a girl named Betty Eaton, a great little dancer. And so we told them, and they got some mantillas, that's the protocol. And we found that the best thing we could wear, which we would never wear when we worked, was our USO uniforms. We came in, my God, thousands of people. The Vatican you don't believe anyway when you see it. Feverishly praying over beads. Here, these 2 creepy actors going to have a private audience with the Pope. Pacelli. Pope Pacelli. No. Pope, that was his Christian name.
Pius.
Pius, yes. The 12th. So we're in an outer room, and in walked the cardinal to tell us the protocol. He says, when His Holiness, he spoke English. When His Holiness walks in the room, you drop to your right knee and you kiss the ring of St. Peter. And he looked at me. I don't know how he knew I wasn't Catholic. But he looked at me and said, this is not compulsory. I want to tell you, Dick, when the Pope walks in the room, the only comfortable thing to do is to go to your knee, you know? Sure. The spiritual leader of millions of people. But Frank says the trouble with people is they don't speak up. I'm going to ask the Pope how we condone that bigoted priest in Detroit, Father Coughlin, who preaches anti-Semitism. And I know the Pope don't know about that. And I'm going to tell. And we lined up, and in walked the Pope, and it's a grabber. I don't care if you're religious or not. When you look at the spiritual leader of millions and millions of people, to repeat myself.
And in that setting. Yeah.
Yes. He went to Sinatra. Now, he didn't know Sinatra, but he's briefed. A great young Italian-American singer. He says, and you, my son, are a tenor. And Frank said, nothing came out but Father Coughlin with nothing. And finally he said, no, Your Holiness, I'm a baritone. Oh, where did you study? And when he said, where did you study, I bit my lip to the blood because you can't laugh. Yeah. But the Pope was Italian. If you're a great singer, you studied. Sure. And finally, when he said, what operas do you sing? I didn't know where to go, you know, and it's so serious, you know. Finally, he came to me, and I had the Pope where I wanted him. Because when he was the papal secretary in the Eucharistic Congress in Chicago, I was there and saw him. And he loved his visit as the papal secretary to America. And I said, I had the honor of seeing Your Holiness in Chicago on Randolph Street when you prayed. And he said, oh, I loved the visit to him. And I had bought from a little old lady in the street 3 rosary beads and put them on. I was thinking of Bing, who was very devout, and Dixie and the 4 boys, but I only had 3. That's all I could buy. And I didn't have to expose them if I knew. Because when the Pope does this to you, everything is blessed on you, you know? I said, does Your Holiness know of Bing Crosby? He said, well, I'm sure. I looked at Frank. I figured going my way didn't hurt being in the Vatican, you know? So the Pope said, is there a Mrs. Crosby? I said, yes, Your Holiness. He turned to the cardinal in attendance, and in Latin or Italian, I said, he gave me 3 mother-of-pearl rosary beads and put them on my arm and blessed them, and he blessed me. And he went on to Saul Chaplin, who was with us, who was very nearsighted, and he couldn't find the ring of St. Peter. You know, you're supposed to kiss the ring, and he gave the Pope a tongue job. He couldn't. Anyway, then we leave, and there's millions of people in the hallway of the Vatican praying feverishly. And we reached the Vatican streets, and Frank, with his full 127 pounds, hit me a shot on my shoulder, and I have very soft skin, and it's nothing. Pow! Because when I hear about his fights, I laugh. Because he gave me his best shot, and says, you think. I get you in the Vatican, and you're plugging Crosby, which made us both break up. The late Jimmy Cannon gave Sinatra the best description I ever heard.
What's that?
Frank Sinatra is the world's greatest deathbed friend. It's got to be something important, and Frank will be there. Somebody said when I was depressed about me, he says, there's nothing wrong. If we'll get him up here at the Caesar's Palace, because he could do 3 hours with me. Because he knows all my routines. We did them overseas. But in this one place, Cerignola, Italy. It's called the Yankee Stadium. It's a big place, and it was pay night. And they were a little boisterous, and with just a little rope in front of us, and Saul Chaplin at the piano. And it's the most frightening sound in the world. A low hum, like a riot starting. Never bothered Frank, not outwardly. He kept singing, Laura is a facing, but I was petrified, and they were coming towards us.
You mean that's their sound of disapproval? And
no,
madness?
we thought that.
Ah.
And finally I yelled, and there was no MPs around, and I yelled down to Saul Chaplin, Star Spangled Banner. Da, 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 da. And he went into that, stopped them. And we broke the patriotic rule. We didn't finish it. We jumped in the car and sped away to the bombed-out hotel we were building in. Yeah. And when we got in the car, we exhaled. I said, you'd think they'd give us some MPs and some ropes and things around. He said, what are you, silly jerk? Where are you going to get ropes in the middle of Italy? I said, who are you calling a jerk, you guinea fink? And we had a few words, and the kids in our show said, oh, God, you must never talk. And I roomed with them. Yeah. We got to the hotel, and I was sick at heart. Because I love Frank. Love him today. And we went down for coffee. He went right up to the room with that dark Sicilian temper. He has a thing, he curls his hair when he had it. And I run into Greg Bautzer. Do you know him, the attorney? Well, he was a naval lieutenant. He had just seen the show. He says, Phil, I've got to write the Hollywood Reporter. That's the greatest USO show I ever saw. They've been sending us accordion and community singing. This was a show that would stand up in Ciro's. I just saw Frank, and I said, Frank, who's responsible for this? And Frank says, well, Phil Silvers, he put it all on. That's Frank. The third person comes in, he's the most loyal man in the world. Yeah. So I knew it's now or never. If I didn't get our friendships restarted, I went up to the room when he was scowling with that dark temper. I took my shoes and says, I lifted the sheet, you know, the netting, and said, have these shined in the morning. And he gave me a little smile, but it's never been the same. He never forgave me.
Such a fascinating man.
Oh, he looks like Abraham Lincoln singing to me. Nobody could touch him.
I know.
I don't care that his voice has deteriorated a little. He, did I say what, Jimmy? Yeah. Oh, the best description of all.
Oh, what was the moaning sound then that you were hearing?
Just guys happy,
just the guys
wanted to get closer to us. Well, we just weren't used to that big an audience.
You thought it was menace.
But before we flew overseas, we were grounded for a while. So we went to a nightclub, and Pearl Bailey was there, who gave the greatest description of Frank, the first Frank Sinatra I ever heard. She was new, and we thought she was great.
Yeah.
We went out the side door because the kids followed Frank wherever we went, and Hank Santacola, his friend, would come up with a cab and we'd duck and go away. But we looked in the doorway after the show. It was a rainy night. Standing with a babushka around her head was Pearl Bailey. And I said, Miss Bailey, we certainly enjoyed you. We didn't mean to run out without going backstage, but we have to. And Frank said, you're something, lady. You were really great. And she said, Mr. Sinatra, I don't want to return the compliment, but let me tell you, man, when you sing, you need somebody. Isn't that great?
Oh, that's certainly not a cliche compliment.
No,
Marvelous.
it's funny that I recall that.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 years ago.
Well, Phil, I'm sorry I haven't been able to get you to talk any more than this.
But I've been alone a lot. We'll do another show right after this.
This is wonderful. Anyway, I must say goodnight tonight because time has fled and we're completely out of time. Phil Silvers, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Comedy icon Phil Silvers passed away today in 1985. Next, we continue honoring the actor in a 1982 episode of The Dick Cavett Show. Growing up, the actor wasn't a stranger to poverty. Silvers once said, quote, "I could put my socks on from either end." At the age of 8, he began performing for money, which would lead into a lucrative lifelong career in show business. Now, The Dick Cavett Show featuring Phil Silvers. This is Decades.
Thank you. I find myself in Hollywood tonight, and I'm doing the third part of a fascinating profile of a great comedian, Phil Silvers. A self-portrait, I suppose you would say. I don't think, I hope you didn't miss the first two parts, that I need to remind you that not only is he, of course, known to the most people as Sergeant Bilko because of television, but as the star of High Button Shoes and Top Banana, and that he's worked in pictures, and that he's worked in vaudeville, and he's worked in small tables in gangster-filled nightclubs, and had an incredible life.
I'm glad there's no audience. They'd only laugh.
That's right. Yeah, should you hear some laughter, there are some people in the studio. I don't want to, but it would dignify the number of them too much to call it an audience, because it's mostly the crew, and we're just getting an extra show out of Phil Silvers.
Isn't it true you'll fire half the crew if they don't laugh?
There's a laughing audition that they have to pass. Yeah, this is so. Is it too obvious kind of interview question to say what's your favorite show that you've ever been in? Aha! Wait a minute. High Button Shoes? High Button Bananas? What do you do, carry one all the time?
We set this up, Onion.
Oh,
Top Banana put me in the niche that I tell you, the dream is better than the realization. When you have your eyes on the horizon, I hope I make it someday. That's the best part of your life, but you don't know it. When you make it, that's when the trouble starts, because you fight with your fingernails to stay up there. It's silly. Right. It shouldn't be that way.
That's right.
But Top Banana is the show that lifted me out of friend of the hero class, you know, following John Payne and Victor Mature around. As a matter of fact, I put those two words in the English lexicon, or rather Johnny Mercer, who wrote the hit song, but he asked me, why Top Banana? Well, a very dear friend of mine had a show, and I don't know how to say no. It was called Just for Laughs. You get the joke?
Just for Laughs?
Yes.
Aha.
And I wondered, the worst show on Broadway had a reason it didn't work, and it was a flop, we'll say. But I said, why are we doing this show? It had something about a man in love with a girl that worked in a not a factory, department store.
Yeah.
I said, but in the middle, that's the show we should do. It was about a comedian that became a top television star, and will be the first one in with an expose of the rigors of and the machinations of television.
Yeah.
And I made up my mind right then and there, because we're very good friends. Milton Berle, you know, he's the one that, he had the power that was needed to start the television. It was so inadequately produced, but he did. He was the pathfinder. And what was Tuesday nights? I mean, that was it. It was him. And I've been on the show many times. I'm a very close friend of Milton's and like him very much. I understand him. Milton has to be on. And what chance did he have not to? Because that's all he's ever done. And I decided to mimic him and all the mannerisms. He would feel a draft on the Sahara Desert. He always wore a towel and a yacht hat, you know. So we're playing golf one day, and the papers broke out about Phil Silver's going to do High Crafts play, and the name came up, Top Banana, and nobody knew what those two words meant then.
Yeah.
Now you see signs, Top Banana Real Estate, Top Banana Flight Company and everything, which you can't sue for because you can't copyright the English language. And we're playing golf, and Milton said to me, what is this thing, Top Banana, you're going to do? I took a deep breath, and I said, I'll tell him. Instead of some cruel person who will make something antagonistic out of this, I said, Milton, it's about a guy that's been on all his life in the parlance of show business. The laugh comes first. The joke must be done, whether it's at the expense of his mother, his sister, the president of the United States, the laugh. If he has a girl, it's the girl bit. His writers take her home because he's going to a cafe to watch another comedian. On, all the time on. And Milton said, my God, Phil, I know guys just like that. And I knew I could never hurt him, you know?
No.
The best laugh I ever got in the theater, you want to know the proudest laugh I'm more proud of ever getting?
Sure.
Because of its integrity. A girl came for the Singing Girl auditions, and she was, let's say, built, sweet face. Judy Sinclair.
Is that her name?
That's God is my judge. She married a comedian, a friend of mine later on.
Was she what they call in commercials now a full-figured lady?
That's putting it mild. She made Dolly Parton look like a boy. I mean, she was stacked. And I didn't think that she should be penalized for that. But I knew it was very distracting. And I knew they'd identify me with other comedians who do breast jokes. I don't. I swear I don't, Dick. And in burlesque, only when in Rome, I mean, I was as dirty as the next guy, but I always covered it. I always went to the footlights and said, it's a little thing I borrowed from the Theater Guild to let them know I didn't want to do it this way. Well, anyway, she was one of the singing girls. In the show, it's my dressing room. We've been rehearsing all night. I'm antagonistic to everybody. I grab the writers. That's not a funny joke. And the waiter, and I called the delicatessen for my breakfast. Salami on, ham on rye. Jerry Riffle's, that was my name in the show. Jerry Biffle's interracial special. Put it on the menu. Ham on rye. Anyway, no, ham on bagel.
Ham on bagel.
Killed the joke. Anyway, I grabbed the stage manager and I said, there are some props missing in the nightclub scene, and don't think you're getting away with it. He said, what were they, Jerry? I said, I'll think of it. Can't think of it now, but you're not getting away with it. A half hour later into the show, I go to a big department store to autograph my books, and my girlfriend, a girl named Judy Lynn, which was her real name, worked in the Modiste shop. So we go down there, and I wait to see her.
This is all a plot now.
Oh, this is plot.
Yeah.
And they're parading around the models, and this girl walks by, and the wardrobe department helped the situation a little with some lifts. And I'm looking at you, and she's walking. I never looked at her once. Now the audience is waiting for the obvious comedian to say, you know, they moved the Rocky Mountains here. There's a million things you could have said. And she walked, and I never said a word about it. I kept bawling out the stage manager. When she hit the wings, I grabbed him. I said, I just remember the props in the nightclub scene. Balloons. Get me a lot of balloons. It was literally a minute laugh.
Yeah.
And
the beautiful part is you had never looked at her.
never
apparently.
why. I abstractly followed. Now, Mr. Burl hears about a show called Top Banana, and Look magazine thought of the great coup in this. Because I did him to perfection, with the whistle, with, you know, he literally was the king of television.
The towel around the throat at rehearsal.
Everything. I did I did the walk, you crazy, you, I kid you a million times. Everything he did. Well, he wondered why Look magazine called him and asked him would he review the opening night in New York of Top Banana. We opened, oh God, we opened in Philadelphia. Somebody goofed. We opened on Yom Kippur night. Now, the average audience in Philadelphia is 75% Jewish. But our stage manager was very intelligent. He went, there's a naval base there. So we invited sailors and so on. We filled the house, because the critics do come, you know. And I knew we had a smash, because the songs may not have been Mercer at his best, only because he wrote words and music and he can't play a note. He had to have a musical secretary. Milton reviewed the show, and he saw it. I'm going to tell it to you as he said it. There's no use, you know, milking it down. He walked in the dressing room at intermission, and he looked at my dressing room. There was the whistle, the yacht hat, the towels. And he looked at me and says, you dirty son of a bitch. And we both broke up laughing. And before he left Philadelphia, he bought 4 units in Top Banana.
What does that mean? Investment in the show?
Opening night in New York, he really reviewed it for Look magazine, and was the greatest asset to our show. He led every laugh. And at intermission, when the gong sounded, he said, well, wait till you see the second act. Is this the greatest thing you've ever seen?
This is Burl in the audience?
In the audience. I mean, out in the lobby, you know. We found a singing dog by accident. When I sang, this dog sang, and it was a riot. If it wasn't for this dog, Milton would have been on every night, because the next night he had it all planned. We take our bows, you know, and of course the star takes his bow last into a semicircle, and then you sing the hit song of the show. And fortunately, I had the dog Sport, that was his name. He was a vicious Airedale, but not with me. I'd feed, when I do this terrible number with him, which he would go, oh, and I'd get so mad at this dog, I'd say, and if you want a real friend, he'd go, oh. I'd say, if you want a friend, buy a cat.
Yeah.
I hated this dog for killing my number. But anyway, Milton, second night, had it all planned. He came running out through the back of the house, back of the curtain, and wanted to say, I'm going to sue. The dog leaped right for his throat. Unfortunately, had him, and we never saw Burl again in the finale. The greatest laugh I ever saw a man do, again with this dog. One night, I'm doing the dog now. This is the most hysterical thing I've ever seen on the stage. Cary Grant, who was a bust-out comic, he loves comedy. He had seen it twice in New York. Now, and Cary Grant is a celebrity. There's no two ways about it. When Cary Grant's in the room, there's a star in the room, you know? He's sitting in the second row on the aisle, and as the show progresses, they watch the show. And he's with his ex-wife, Betsy Blair.
I think it's right.
Drake or Blair, I don't know. Anyway, he wants her to see the show. Now the dog, we come to the dog number, and nobody watched him, and he fell asleep in his dressing room, and steam heated because it was cold. And they got him down on the stage at time, and then the most human thing I ever saw. He knew he had to do something, and he was fractured. And I said, when you're blue and lonely too, nobody ever loves you like your dog. And he went, oh. When you're blue and fatherly too, nobody loves you. Oh. And finally he hit a note. In the whole 2 years, I never heard Cary Grant is under the table, because he's seen the show twice, and you know, the audience laughed like they did every night. This wasn't, because they'd never seen the other, you know. Finally, Cary Grant is sitting right there in the second row. And the dog hit a note that I never heard. It was up in the cranium. He went, was a laugh from the audience, but from Cary Grant, it was a ha ha, and the dog went, ooh. It was so human. What's funny about this? Now Grant is trying to get inconspicuous. I bit my lip till it bled. I had to stay in the car. But it was so funny, it was painful, you know? His name was Sport Morgan, and he was how he existed. He came to the theater. We needed more money from backers. And a man in the wicked business had a little puppy, and he was a voice enthusiast. He studied singing, not to be a professional. And he gave this dog to the lady he married. It came with the marriage. And she had a piano. He'd go, ah, do the scale. And this dog went, oh. That's how he found out the dog does this. So when he came to our audition for backers, he tied the dog in the alley of the Schubert Theater. And when I was singing, if you want to be the top banana, oh, we heard this from the alley. I said, whose dog is that? I said, will he do it all the time? He says, he does it with me. So we brought the dog in, and he was very skittish. Because I told the chorus, please be quiet, everybody be quiet. Dinah, and he go, wah, wah, wah. He knew he had to do something. It took him, I said, let him live with me. The dog. And he got to love me. And there was only one terrible thing. Did you ever see an Irish Airedale, if you wet them and bathe them, it takes 40 days for them to dry. And I take a shower every night or I can't fall asleep. And it got to be a contest. I try to go to the bathroom. And I dash, and he dash in too.
In the shower with you.
And the next day he'd sneeze and have a... I wonder where he is. The man who owns a dog, happily, hopefully, is watching this show.
Oh, I hope so.
And he'll relive it.
But
Sport must be gone by now, because that was 1951.
The idea of the dog oversleeping for his entrance and coming on, love that.
The biggest letdown I ever had. It's a great, I love New York. I used to love New York. Now it's held up. When I did Forum, before I got ill, I had in the contract transportation to and from the theater. Because, you know, it was a jungle, and the hookers and everything. And this one night I said, let me off at, I lived at the Delmonico, right above Ed Sullivan. And I said, let me off here, and I wanted to walk. We'd done 2 shows, I wanted to calm down. So I walked up Madison to 72nd, and then I was going to go right down to Park and then walk down to 59th. About 50 yards from Park, I won't say the words, but your mother, if you move, you're dead. This gun in my head, and that's the most sickening feeling in the world. And I talked very quickly. I said, here's my wristwatch. The money's in my right-hand pocket. Don't get frightened. I have 5 children. Take all my money. I won't say a word.
That's the smart
And then
thing.
there was a long pause, and this voice says, you Bilko? I know I got a chance now. I said, yeah. He said, other pig's no good. You're all right. Don't move. Don't turn around for 5 minutes anymore. And Dick, I give you my solemn word, I recognize the voice. It was a black extra that we had used in the Bilko show. We broke the color line. I don't know if you know that. The late Nat Hiken, who's the greatest comedy writer of our era, notwithstanding Neil Simon, who worked under him.
Gee, what a
We
story.
got word from Winston-Salem, does he have to have... Fortunately, we were highly rated. I said, yes. We have black shows. They get killed just like we get killed. They get shot. If we didn't have a rating, they'd close me down. But anyway, I'm walking up Park Avenue. Let's finish on a high, funny note. Funny note? We're walking.
We can always get the dog in here.
We're walking, and a very nice, this is important to the story, a man dressed impeccably like you. Yeah,
As you see
comic,
me
you know,
now.
like you, to make you laugh.
Yeah.
And he stopped me. That went over your head. He stopped me
It's easy.
and says, please forgive me. I had no right intruding on you, but may I thank you for the happy moments you've given me. Well, that'll stop you. I said, if you think I'm not pleased at that sort of an introduction, you're wrong. That's very nice of you. Thank you. Now I want to know what he knows me from. I said, did you enjoy the Bilko show? He says, who? I said, did you ever see the Bilko show? And he didn't know what I was talking about. I said, oh, it's the theater. High button shoes. A shoe stop? No, that was the name of a show. Top Banana? Who did it? Do, re, mi? A funny thing happened on the phone. He hadn't seen any of these things. I said, you just said thank me for all the happy moments. What do you think he knew me from? There was a show on Channel 5. The sponsor was X-Lax. Isn't that enough for you? It was called Leave It to the Girls with a male component. That's the only place he ever saw me. Thank you for the moments you've given me.
If you'd only known, you could have quit when you did Leave It to the Girls.
I'd never left Maggie McGillis.
Are you glad you made the choice you did to go into the show business?
I'll never get out of it. There's one bad thing I've done. When I collapsed, I went into therapy, and the biggest thing, I think too many people rely on psychiatry. I think it's a toy with some people. But the thing that did come out, and I condone it, I say it's right. I don't know how to fix it. But I'll never be, well, I'm 70 years old. The frustration of my life is that I didn't write, because I can write.
You're apparently a natural writer.
Yes, I wrote all the shows I've been in, I wrote on my feet. And I wrote one song, made $1 million, Nancy with the Laughing Face, and I'll give you a preview because you'll be on after her marriage.
Is it a 30-second preview?
Yeah, I'll give you just the middle part.
Okay.
She has 4 sisters as equally lovely, and her mother's a mother and pal. But when it comes to her doing home cooking, pal, eat at Nathan Al's. And so we welcome with open arms this new boy. Gee, isn't it swell? This new boy's a Jew boy. There's love all over the place, 'cause Nancy's got a laughing face. The applause is deafening.
I'm glad to see. Should we, is this the time to remind them there's no audience? Phil Silvers, we're out of time. Thank you. You obviously have a songwriting career ahead of you, not behind you.
There's been some
That's really wonderful.
non-good things happen in my life.
Yeah.
This 3 shows is not one of them. I've always loved you. I loved you when you were a kid. I love you now. I think you're the best of all that does what you do. I think you should act. I think you should write. And I think you should be completely happy because you bring so much joy.
Wow. Well, that's very moving. Thank you, Phil.
Pleasure.
A real treat to have you here. Good night.
Good night.